welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your Madelyn Pro with sort of upgraded graphics. You can play me on both fidelity and performance mode at the same time, host Madelyn.
I'm your $700 plus 80 host Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. It's my side quest, so I decided that for once we'd be like sort of topical on Talk This, although probably this isn't even topical. Probably we've all moved on.
Yeah, you're right. We've forgotten.
It's already gone.
We've memory holed it already.
it's gone into the ether, but we're talking about console prices. We've talked about the history of gaming consoles before. Various console types have come up on the show, but we haven't ever talked specifically about what they cost. So this is just going to be kind of an HGTV sort of style special where we go through and we sell you gaming consoles.
Yeah, our new console that we're launching right now.
That's right.
We haven't built any of it yet, and we don't know what it'll do, but it'll definitely have 2 screens.
It's the concept of an idea.
Yeah.
We've got that.
And it'll be at least $950, I think.
That's too cheap. Yeah, so if you're a gaming person who existed in the past couple of weeks, you probably heard that Sony did like a 12-minute special presentation, which is funny in itself, right? Just to like tune in for my YouTube premiere.
That's kind of how we announce things now, so it's pretty normal.
Just the fact that it's only 12 minutes long, something about that is funny to me.
I guess.
It's like, it should be at least, you should also have Silksong in there.
Right? Yeah, if they just had Silksong in there, this all would have been avoided.
Everyone would have forgotten. They would have been like, exclusive to the PlayStation 5 Pro.
I know. And I would be like, damn it.
Gotta get it.
Gotta get it
now. But, you know, that Sony announced, finally, the long-awaited, I guess, release of the PS5 Pro, which had some much-memed screenshots of the before and afters that don't look that different. And that lets you, as I hinted in my intro, you never have to choose again between our 2 modes.
Yes. The main selling point of the PS5 Pro is it's become pretty ubiquitous in any like current generation console game, is you either pick between performance or fidelity mode, right? Which means you either get your 60 FPS or you get your high resolution graphics. And the point of this is so you don't have to do that anymore, so that you can get 60 FPS, but you can also get high resolutions at the same time. I like, you know, there's funny things of like pointing at things and not being able to see much difference, but like I can tell the difference. Even in the YouTube thing, I can tell it's different. It's just like it's not a whole console generation, right? It's a half step.
Sure. I guess I just feel like I sometimes misidentify which one is better.
Well, neither's. Oh, I guess so. I don't know. Just off the pictures I saw, I thought it was pretty obvious.
Sure. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying I have the curse of, unfortunately, sometimes I look at those and I think the wrong one is the better one.
Sure. There's also the problem of, especially when you're getting into like these minimal sort of upgrades, is, you know, YouTube's encoding isn't great, for one thing. So any sort of things you show on there is already going to be like super compressed.
Right.
And just generally, for these sorts of upgrades, you need a high performance TV to be able to appreciate them, right? I do think about this sometimes when I'm like, I can't tell the difference between 30 and 60 or, you know, whatever. It's like, yeah. I don't have a high def TV. So like, I have just a normal standard sort of flat screen television, right? I did not spend $2,000 on my television or whatever. So of course I can see it less easily than someone who perhaps has like a dedicated sort of gaming setup, right? And that's who the PS5 Pro is for what it's worth. It's for graphics freaks, not for the general consumer.
Yeah, I do have to say, I mean, not that I ever go into menus looking for this, and so I don't even know how much I've seen it, but like when I'm offered the choice between fidelity mode and performance mode, I do feel like DW in that meme where it's like, this sign can't stop me because I can't read.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. Those are modes.
Yeah.
They sure are.
Yeah.
But yes, we buried the lead here, which is that the PS3, I will talk about later. This is not a PS3.
They're re-releasing the PS3, everybody.
Here it is. We buried the lead. They buried in there. They're re-releasing the PS3. No. The PS5 Pro, like base model of it, no disk drive, which is the real outrage. Everyone whining about the stand. Like, get over yourself.
It's just because the PS5 comes with a stand. So, like, it's a little weird to call something a Pro when it doesn't have as many features as the base thing. So
Look,
I get it.
That was Sony's mistake. They should not have given the gamers... You can't give the gamers anything.
Also, I am sympathetic, too, as someone who literally has no place they could put their PS5 horizontally. So...
If I put it vertically, I'd be afraid that I'd knock it over. So, just there's two kinds of people.
Yeah.
But it's priced at $699.
Yes. And you can get an additional disk drive add-on that's also compatible with the Slim. So they've had this for an additional $80. So if you want your PS5 Pro with a disk drive, that's $780 in the US. And if you live anywhere else,
it's more.
Way more than that.
Why?
We could do a whole episode on like regional pricing because I don't understand how companies decide how to do it. Japan, for instance, it's like 1,200 yen or something like that. Am I doing that right?
120,000 yen.
120,000 yen, yeah. And that's like, with the current exchange rate, that's way more expensive.
Disaster. So there was a swift and rapid backlash, because the good folks at Sony, they missed that feeling. The generation of people here, they were like, I too would like to experience the rapid scorn of the populace. Although I'm sure that nothing can really capture the feeling of doing that live in a room with people. We'll circle back to that.
Sony has been on the literal definition of the it's so over, we're so back, it's so over like the last month. Yeah. So
and right now it's so over.
It's so over right now.
But there was rapid backlash, and there was then backlash to the backlash. You know that's happening when Gamer Jeff swoops in with a tweet. So, of course, people were like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. That's even more expensive than I thought it would be. That, I think, was the big kicker, is that everyone was expecting that the PlayStation 5 Pro was going to be expensive, and then it was more expensive than what they had thought would be expensive.
Yeah.
But Gamer Jeff and many others swooped in to say, no. If you compare it with inflation, it's not even that expensive.
See, I don't really get the point they were trying to make with that. Like, it's still the second most expensive PlayStation console when adjusted for inflation. Like, I get that, like, the launch prices for the previous consoles would now be more now, right? But they're still not that expensive.
I did see some other analyses that had some of these higher up. I think it depends on how you kind of like count the inflation, basically. But yeah, no, it's according to Jeff's math, it is still the second most expensive console, second only to the PS3, which would come in at $778.
Which, if you were around when the PS3 came out, or have done any sort of history research since then, it was considered pretty comically expensive at the time.
It was.
When it was announced. And probably had a marked impact on its initial sales performance.
We'll talk about that. But to me, I mean, it does sort of point to, regardless of the fairness of the pricing, right? I think it does point to this expectation that games are always going to cost the same. right? I mean, whatever. Of course, we all get angry about our milk going up or our eggs going up or whatever the like inflation index is, blah, blah, blah. But I do feel like some of the reaction to this pricing is coming from the same place as the reaction to like a $70 game. Like something about games is like, no, this is what it should cost.
Well,
the cost of it should be this.
We've talked about this before, and I do somewhat agree with that, right? That games are going to be variable in price, and perhaps we're too stringent about like what should cost what. But like, it's hard to make the argument right now, as the gaming industry is, that like my extra $10 spent on a game is saving employees, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is that money going to? Another round of layoffs? Oh, okay.
Shareholders.
I don't know. I don't think Sony has had prominent layoffs this year. But Xbox sure has. So, I don't know. Like, it's just like, you know, sure, it costs a lot, but where's that money going? It's going, you know, not to real people.
Investors are real people, Emma.
Are we sure?
No. I will say that for consoles are historically lost leaders. We saw a little bit, like the realities of that came out in the Apple versus Epic trial, right? And what's the head of Xbox's name? Jim something, right?
Frick. Why do I not remember his name right now? Phil Spencer.
Oh, right. Jim is at Sony, right? Phil Spencer.
Yeah.
Phil Spencer has come out and been like, yeah, like our Xboxes lose us as much as $200 a console, right? And so the idea, right, is that the console is just the beginning, right? You can't just get the console. You have to buy controllers. You have to buy games. You have to get the best deal in gaming if it's Xbox or PlayStation Plus. And so like the console is just a gateway to making a lot of money. And so you want to get as much adoption of the console as possible so you can make your money on all of that stuff that people will need to use the console and will use the console for. But apparently that's something that has become like less the case in recent console generation. Nintendo has been very vocal that they will not sell the Nintendo Switch at a loss. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Switch is cheaper than all its competitors now, so there's no real reason for them to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, I think that it might not have started this way, but the PS5 with the disc drive, the baseline one, is profitable. The digital one is not, but that must be like a very thin margin, given that the difference between those is only $100.
Yeah.
So, like, in thinking about that, I was thinking, well, okay, I understand why you wouldn't want to price your Pro console to lose money, right? Because what percentage of your ecosystem is entering the generation with a Pro? Or
I do think it's important to put in context. You know, we've compared this to the PS3, but this isn't like, they're not trying to sell this to their whole ecosystem. Just like they weren't trying to sell the PS4 Pro to the whole ecosystem. This is like specifically for a very niche sort of hardcore audience, right? Like there was like an analytics report that I found on Ampere Analysis Insights. That was like, you know, the PS4 Pro sold like 14.5 million units by the end. And they're expecting that this will probably sell like 13 million units in comparison, considering like factoring in the price and such. So like these aren't like things they want to sell like their base consoles. Like the PS4 sold like 100+ million units in comparison, right? So that, I think that is important to keep in mind when looking at the price. Like, no matter what this was priced, I wasn't going to buy it, right? It doesn't matter if it was like $500. It's still not something that is worth it to me personally, right? Because I don't have a hardcore TV.
The market for this is graphics freaks and like gullible moms.
There's a couple things I saw that, like, there's probably a decent, like, a small chunk of audience that's just been on the PS4 Pro, and has been waiting to upgrade. So I think you could see people moving from the half step to the half step, for example. And yeah, there might be some people who just don't have a PS5 yet who might get it, or a very, very small amount of, like, freaks. I say freaks affectionately in this case.
Freaks.
But another thing this analysis pointed out is they likely feel like they can price it this way because Xbox does not have a half step. And doesn't seem like they are going to for this generation. So there's not a direct competitor for this sort of product, right? Like, even if Nintendo's like, the Switch 2 comes out the same day, you know, that's not...
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
It's not the same audience.
Unless it is. You never know. But, yeah.
It's probably not the same audience. So they probably feel like they can price it higher because even people who might be on Xbox but are like, but I want, you know, my hardcore console, there could even be some overlap there or some transfer there. So I thought that was interesting. Although the FTC might be going, huh? No competitor.
It is maybe a better investment if you think of it as a budget PS6.
Yeah, that's fair.
Just given that, look, I don't know, maybe somebody is really going to have a breakthrough in graphics or gaming technology such that the PS6 is so radically different that this generation can't play out again. But it seems much more likely that what's going to happen is that once again, I mean, God, when did the PlayStation 5 come out? 2020, right?
Yeah, like 4 years ago. It took them like a year longer to release this than it did the PS4 Pro, for example.
So my point being, though, that games are still being cross-gen released.
Yeah.
We are only really just barely starting to see some games that are not. I mean, I know there have been a scattering of them, but it's only recently that I've started in our, like, podcast research to see it being like, maybe they're not all coming out for the PlayStation 4 anymore. So there's really been, not to sound like too much of a capital G gamer here, right? But there's really been no real reason to upgrade, right? Why would you? I mean, you know, having switched from the PS4 to the PS5, you know, they look better on the PS5. They certainly do. But it's not like, for me, who's not a graphics freak, like, if my base PlayStation 4 probably wouldn't have done, or like my slim PlayStation 4, right? Something I had probably wouldn't have carried me through some of the stuff that I've played quite so well, or stuff that I'm planning to play quite so well. But if I'd had a Pro, I'm sure it would have been fine. So if you're thinking about this as like, well, the PlayStation 6 might be even more expensive than this, and this console is probably going to play everything that's on the PlayStation 6 until like 2030, then maybe it's a bargain.
Yeah, this analysis report also pointed out that the game that will get people to upgrade is around the corner, right? GTA 6. And, you know, there's been some discussion over whether the Pro will actually, like, significantly enhance GTA 6 with its, like, very complex interactions going on, right? That needs the sort of power, the processing power, and whether the Pro's upgrades actually, like, affect that. But, you know, if GTA 6 is coming out and you're thinking, oh, you know, should I upgrade to the PS5 or the Series X? You might be like, well, fancier, you know?
Yeah. Fancy. But I thought the article you linked was like, it might even not even matter.
Sure, but if you're upgrading because you want to play...
Upgrading. I get it.
You're already upgrading because you want to play GTA 6, which will not be cross-gen.
Right.
You might be like, well, I could get the fancy one, you know? So it's like a smart time to release this.
Yeah.
Based entirely on the power of Grand Theft Auto.
Side note, is that game ever actually going to come out?
Yeah, yes.
Is it?
It's like for next year, right?
Is it? I feel like Grand Theft Auto 6 has been coming soon for like 8 years, but
No, they just haven't said anything about it for like 8 years and then announced it.
Fair enough. I'm just saying, don't be fooled. Don't be tricked into getting a PS5 Pro because you think it's coming.
Sure. Yeah.
For all you know, they're never going to release it. They're just going to keep teasing it forever and ever and ever to sell consoles.
Pretty sure that game is also not announced for PC yet, so in that way it's like a particularly like powerful purchase motivator.
Well, that segs nicely into one of the kind of common article refrains in response to this $700 console, which is you might as well just get a gaming PC. Which on one hand, yes, on the other hand,
Yeah, it's interesting because for the Pro, I sort of see the argument, right? We said already it's like a specialty piece of hardware, and if you're really into like the way things look on your games, then yeah, maybe you are better off starting to invest in a gaming PC. It becomes less so when you're just thinking about like a normal console, right? Because the whole setup is different, right? You can say like, oh, you can spend just as much on a gaming PC as you do on whatever, but it comes with a lot of extra peripherals that you have to get, right?
Yeah.
A really comfy gamer chair, for example.
Crucial. Look,
a good
here's
desk.
The thing, though. You could say the same thing about like you need a nice couch, but
sure,
yes.
But you probably more likely just have a couch in your house.
Emma, have you seen the apartments of young men?
No.
They do not. Futon on the floor.
Well, you can sit in your futon on the floor and play games on your console more easily than you can on your PC, I think.
It's true.
But yeah, there's a good article on, it was on PC Gamer, just like talking about like, it's not just the matter of like switching one out for the other. It's a matter of like changing your whole gaming lifestyle habits. But I did listen to a Vergecast where they were talking about like the PS5 Pro is starting to really position itself as just like a big old PC. And that is kind of a dangerous position to put your console in, right? Because, you know, part of the reason to buy a console is like convenience. You know, and like where you play it and stuff. But if you're really like focusing in on like the one unique feature of like the PS5 is like its controller, right? Yeah. And so it's starting to position itself as a competitor to PCs, whereas you would never mistake the Switch for a PC competitor.
Certainly not.
Because it's a console that is its own unique thing that you use. Mm-hmm. Right? It's sort of fundamentally different from a PC that you can play games on. And that's why it's appealing to have in combination with any other number of things, right?
Right.
So I did think that was an interesting point of like, it's very expensive, and at a certain point of expense, if you're really into like making your game look good, why not just let's make the jump, right? Again, things that don't apply to me. I will happily buy my base PS6 when it comes out in like 8 years or whatever.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the separate disc drive?
So,
this has become just a PS5 episode. I will talk about the PlayStation 3
to tie it back
eventually.
to costs, okay?
Yeah.
There's a lot of hidden costs to consoles starting to train you out of disk drives. You know, like there's a point you can make of like, oh, you know, they're not really playing off the disc anymore, right? It's just sort of like a placebo
comforting
thing.
Relic.
Yeah. But you can still take that disc and pass it around to your friends, right? You can rent games from a rental service. If you're in a lucky place where the library has video games, you can get out games from the library.
But Emma, then you aren't supporting the devs and they're going to get laid off.
I know, yeah.
It's your
So
fault.
the dangerous
library's
thing
fault.
is by moving to digital, you severely limit the number of places where you can actually procure games. And realistically, most people are going to buy it from the internal store, right? They're not going to get a code from somewhere else and type it in or whatever. So it severely limits your marketplace options. And allows them to control the price that you're setting, right? You can't look at a lot of different places and be like, oh, it's on sale at Best Buy or whatever, right? So I can buy it there. It's like, no, you just have to buy it based on whatever price it is right now on the PlayStation Store.
And just buy the license to it, too. I mean, I recognize that games on discs you don't really own either. They can also take those away from you. But man... Like, they just did that with that game that I've already forgotten the name of. They've wiped it from my brain.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just like, yes, you know, putting aside the physical discs aren't really physical in a meaningful way anymore. It's the fact that it is on a disc still means that there's a lot of ways to procure it.
That's right.
That doesn't cost you anything and is legal still.
Yep.
And so by eliminating that, you start adding more costs to playing video games that people may have been able to avoid until now. And I'm not going to be super surprised if the PS6, if they ever release that or whatever it comes out, does not have a disc drive, period.
Well, there's just no incentive to do it, other than that people will be whiny about it. And that they don't seem to care about that.
Again, on this Vergecast, there was one point that was brought up of, like, one of the hosts was saying, like, I think that, like, the people who are graphics freaks, he didn't say that, that's our term, but the people who are graphic freaks
is an ongoing term
and
here.
the people who are interested in having a physical collection have, like, a crossover, which, to be honest, for games, I'm not sure that's true. You said, like, It sounds like it's true, right? But it might not be. But I think it
feels
sounds
like it should be true, and then I think if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, it's like, no, that actually doesn't feel like it should be true.
Well, because it sounds true because it's true for, like, every other form of media.
Yes.
Right?
Like, if you love high-fidelity music, you love to own a record.
Vinyls, yeah. And if you love movies, you love owning Blu-rays. And even if you love books, you love buying, like, collector's fancy cover editions, right, for your bookshelf. Yeah. But I think with games, because PCs have been discless for so long now, which I looked up, and apparently just, like, wasn't really a huge backlash, seems to be the consensus. Mostly because putting discs into your PC was, like, way more complicated than putting discs into your console, for what it's worth. But because those have been discless for so long, and because there's a huge contingent of graphics freaks who are PC gamers, I don't know if that's really true. For games specifically.
Yeah, no, I that's exactly what it comes down to for me, is like, you actually kind of can't be a graphics freak and feel possessive about having things physically. Because they're just not released that way.
The other contingent who might be interested in buying the PS5 Pro, these PlayStation freaks.
Sure.
That's where you might get some overlap.
Yes,
right?
Those people are going to want the collector's edition of the game.
Yes.
But man, PlayStation freaks, that one is maybe used in a vaguely derogatory way.
Just speaking from, like, an audience perspective, that's where they're possibly getting some, like, friction there from their most dedicated fan base. Which, you know, maybe that's a bad thing for them, actually. Yeah. So, who knows?
Well, they don't seem to have learned from the past. Or maybe they have, and they were like, it was fine, we lived.
Yeah.
But of course, one of the other, I looked into this, there don't seem to be, like, so many, like, giant cultural backlashes to console prices like there have been for this and the PlayStation 3. There were other game consoles that were more expensive than this. Shout out to the Neo Geo, which was like $1,000+ in modern money.
Yeah.
But that was basically like bringing an arcade machine into your home.
Right. I feel like when the Series X was announced, there was a little bit of, like, that's kind of expensive.
Yeah.
But sort of in a way of, like, oh, they've switched.
Yeah. Yeah. But yes, the most notorious example of this is, of course, the announcement of the PS3 at E3 2006, where they announced it, and they were also like, it's $600.
Yeah.
And apparently the oxygen just went out of the room. Which, like, man, can you imagine being up there and that happening to you?
The PS3 was just such an eldritch abomination in so many ways.
Weird choice.
Still a mystery to emulate somehow.
Yes. They can't figure out how its brain works.
It's at Sony specifically, where it was made.
Yes, they're like, we don't know how we made this. I did enjoy, so they did this, and, there's articles from, like, quoting some of the Xbox team, like, just, like, ready to, like, hoot and holler when this happened, basically. Because, of course, the PS2 was a total juggernaut, right? Just, like, absolutely dominated the market. And, like, this gave the Xbox 360 a chance to muscle in on some market share.
And they absolutely won that generation, I think.
Yeah, they're quoted as saying, oh, this could be really fun.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. But then, in more contemporary interviews, there have been acknowledgements from Sony brass that, like, that was probably too expensive. Although they were apparently still losing money on every $600 PS3.
Again, eldritch abomination.
Just like, what
was in that? What was in that console?
A gold bar. It's an essential part of the system running.
Yeah.
But, Sony president Ken Kutaragi, there's kind of a breakdown of this on Games Industry, like, just over and over in interviews was like, no, like, this is fine. He said, no game machines are comparable to the PS3, which is neither a genuine game console, home electronics product, nor a personal computer. It is a new kind of product. I'm gonna go on the record and say, wrong, it's a game console. Maybe. Wrong, it's an eldritch abomination.
Yeah, like, what does that sound like? But, like, he made, like, a weird eldritch deal to create the device known as the PS3.
It is a demon. He said in another interview the price, quote, was probably too cheap. Which, what? He also said in another, it is more than a toy. It is a PlayStation 3, and it is the only PlayStation 3.
See?
I hope that those who understand this will gladly purchase it. And then finally, one of the, like, really notorious, like, marketing pitches about this, he said their ideal situation with the console was, quote, for consumers to think to themselves, okay, I'll work more hours and buy it.
Yeah. That does remind me that I did see on Twitter that, like, Pat, formerly from, like, the Superfest Friends group, the streamer, had, like, broken down the cost of each PlayStation console by, like, how many hours you would need to work at minimum wage to buy it.
Yeah.
That was,
not
like,
really even fair.
That was, like, illuminating to me.
Yeah.
Measuring your game console purchase by the hours of your life that you spend at work.
Look, here's the thing, though, right? I mean, here is what I will say about these consoles. This is so expensive, but as some articles pointed out, right? How many hours do you spend using that thing?
Yeah.
Right? In the same way as people are like, wah, 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 shorter games should be cheaper, wah, 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 price per hour, right? I feel like plenty of those same people are wah-wah-wahing about how expensive this is. But if you break down how much it would cost you, like, per hour that you play on that thing over the course of your ownership of it, right? Like, it's certainly less expensive, I'm sure, than the amount of money that, like, kids spent at the arcade.
Sure.
So it's interesting for me always to kind of put that into the context of, like, well, it certainly costs you less than $1 an hour over its lifetime, probably dramatically less if you're playing it as much as we do.
Again, as much as we do is also, a caveat Because there are people who buy these that perhaps do not play as much as we do.
You're right, of course. But on
And
the
so
other hand,
the
I'm
price
not
per
playing-
hour calculation is affected by how often you play, obviously, of course.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I'm not playing Fortnite. I'm not playing Apex, right? They're like, well, yes, not everyone is immersing themselves into the crime lords of Hawaii
Right.
in the way that I am.
Yeah.
On that scale, or not everyone is whatever playing through all of Cold Steel
Right.
like you.
Yeah.
Also, we are not doing the kind of like casual several hours a day of social gaming that I think is for, gotta be for like a good chunk of users, something that's pretty normal.
That's fair.
The kinds of people where it's like, oh, like you are playing, 2 hours of Fortnite every day, let alone not, anything else. And in that case, man, in just a year, it's only been $1 an hour.
Right.
I think we are firmly middle of the pack. I mean, not really. I think you're right that like probably 50% of people buy these and then barely use them. But I think if you were to control for people who play like less than 10 hours a year, we're probably solid middle of the pack.
Still not buying it. How much do you think the Switch 2 will cost?
I was wondering about that. How much does the Switch cost? Like, I don't know.
It costs like, doesn't it cost like $350 or something?
Sure. I think the Switch 2 will be $450. What does the Steam Deck cost? I think it'll be what the Steam Deck costs.
The Steam Deck costs more and less depending on how big the storage is.
What does a middle-of-the-line Steam Deck cost?
Okay. So a Switch costs, or at least the original price, okay? So it probably goes down from here. So OLED costs $350. The base Switch costs $299 originally. Okay. The Steam Deck costs anywhere from $399 to $649.
Oh, whoa. Yeah, I think Switch 2 will be no more than $499.
They have officially said that it'll be the Switch. They're calling it the Switch 2, by the way.
I hope they don't, by the way.
No, that they've said that now.
Have they really?
I believe it's now confirmed that it's officially the Switch 2, which is
sucks.
fascinating for Nintendo, actually.
Yeah.
Unless I misinterpreted something I saw, but
Can they do the Switch 64 or something?
I know, or like anything like even when they've used the same name, they've never just done like 2.
Couldn't it be the Switch U?
In fact, the PlayStation is like the only system that's done like the normal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbering, actually.
And
thinking
good for
about
them. What is Xbox doing? Mystery.
But that does indicate to me that the Switch 2 will not be like a dramatic difference. So I'm really curious as to like what they're gonna add to it. Wii U style,
Well, especially given that there's been a lot of rumors that it's not even going to be OLED.
Yeah, I think I heard that too. I hope it has 2 screens.
That'd be crazy. Do you think that's why? Do you think that's why they're calling it the Switch 2?
That's why the 3DS had 3 screens.
Shut up.
Just
It was 3D.
I know.
I'm just saying. I'd like everyone listening to this podcast, come back to that. Clip that. Chat.
No, just I hope it's a little weird because Nintendo is like the only. Well, there's like super weird stuff like the Playdate, of course, obviously.
Right.
But Nintendo's the only major console manufacturer that does weird stuff with their console. So.
I hope it comes with a Game Boy. Like, some kind of, like,
original
weird little
Game Boy.
screen.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Peripheral. Like a tiny screen and a big screen. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, that'd be good. Like the
or
Wii
there's
U.
screens on the front and the back, so that you and your friend can play like hold hands and play.
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
That's why it's called the Switch 2, because it's only for couples.
Yeah, so you think it'll be no more than what? No more than 400?
No more than $499, but I think $450.
Yeah. I think it'll be 400.
Wow, that's bold. You're ready to, do a reaction video where when it's like $575, you're like, oh!
I gotta get my reaction thumbnail faces.
Listeners, you can't see it, but it's pretty good.
I'm trying to vocalize the sound of the face that I'm making as I do
Is
it.
it working, listeners?
Can you visualize it?
What should a console cost, Emma?
It's interesting, right? Because they are like sort of low power PCs, right?
Yeah.
Like buying a new computer is expensive. And so these consoles are always going to be expensive because it's just like you're buying another computer, essentially. Yeah. Which is a shame, right? Because it's you don't necessarily need that for many other hobbies. The entry point of buying another computer for yourself. Although maybe you bought a PS5 just to watch movies. Is totally possible.
Maybe you did, because that's how people watch movies these days, on discs.
I mean, they do, the film freaks.
That's true. Imagine being a film freak and being like, the way I'm going to do that is by buying a PS5. That's really funny to me.
I mean, it's a good Blu-ray player. It's a good
I'm not
Blu-ray
saying
player.
it's not. I'm just saying I'd like an interview with that person.
What was I saying? I mean, it sucks that there's this upfront cost to the hobby. So I mean,
about the notes a little bit.
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit of like on like the removal of the disk drive and the ways that sucks, of like increasing this sort of cost that you have to do to buy into any game that you're playing, right? I will actually be interested if there is like FTC stuff, if they do end up doing that down the road, of
just like the storefronts. If you
remove the disk drive, like theoretically you can buy codes from other places, right? But it's sort of like Apple a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious if that manifested into anything. I guess it'll just depend on who's in charge and how active the FTC is under their administration.
You said it.
But yeah, like the removal of the disk drive is like adding more upfront costs, and the Vergecast again made a good point of like they just want to eliminate the used game market, right? Because that's again money that's not in their grubby little fists, and every time the Library of Congress has like a exemption meeting, there's always like a huge argument to be had about like minuscule like opening up. Like right now there's arguments that are being considered on like letting like researchers access games in other university collections, like emulated wise, like by like checking it out like an ebook, but like an e-game. And they're like, no, that makes a virtual arcade, we don't want that. They're like seeking a DMCA exemption, essentially. And so like, and even that of like, you can't let people whose job it is to study these games, you're gonna make them fly across the country to go play a game? Really?
Apparently.
And it's just frustrating that I get the like frustration of $70 games in that sense, right? Of just feeling like they're trying to nickel and dime you out of every single dollar they possibly can, and slowly closing the routes available to you to not do that.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like I guess it's sort of like streaming services a little bit too, right? Although I guess in a different way. In this way, they're like closing you in versus streaming services where it's like, oh, I need 50 subscriptions.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, right? Because obviously game development is expensive. It perhaps is getting prohibitively expensive. Over and under our current economic model, right? And
it's crazy that we both work in industries where it's like, oh, this is actually too expensive to happen anymore.
Yeah. And I think that gates people off from experiencing things that are cool, and that sucks.
I do think it's like in some ways, well, I don't know. Like you made the point of like, oh, like games are sort of unique in this way, but like, are they? Books, okay? Like if you're a reader, right? You still have the ability to access a lot of books for free. Okay, that's there. You know, I'll grant that streaming has made it, in some senses, some television and movies more accessible. In other senses, not at all. In other senses, much worse.
Yeah, you're right that there's no like rent by mail anymore for movies and TV shows. Although there is still like most libraries will have at least a small film and TV section, and many have Canopy as well. So there are some things that you can get available for free.
But I am thinking of comparing games to like, okay, so like hobbies that cost money, right? If you're playing any kind of sport, you're, you know, in terms of like investing in gear, signing up for a league or a gym membership or whatever, the upfront cost might be different, but I do sort of feel like it's comparable in a lot of ways to certain sports.
That's
Not
fair.
if you're like a runner, but yeah.
That's fair.
But that's crazy in itself because many sports are really expensive.
Yeah.
And this is the sport of sitting on your couch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just all too expensive. That's the takeaway from the podcast. Everything's too expensive.
It's true. Everything is too expensive.
And what does one do about that? Nothing.
Nothing. Never buy a house. Only buy the PS5 Pro.
It's an investment piece.
It really is like that's like the meme, right? My parents in their 20s versus me in my 20s. I will never financially recover from this purchase. The PS5 Pro is like the perfect thing to put in there.
Yeah. You should make that.
Yeah.
Well, if you were gonna announce a disastrous console that was too expensive, what would it be?
Like I said, it's our new talkie. The talkie. It's got 2 screens. It's voice controlled. And it's $950.
And what does it do when I go, you know, like that? Insert the swear word of your choice there.
It calls you stupid baby, because I've heard gamers like that. So it says, shut up, you stupid baby. Shut up is on the top screen. You stupid baby is on the bottom screen.
Oh, it doesn't talk to you. It just shows that on the screen. I see.
Oh, you're right. It could talk to you as well.
I want like a goofy style. Shut up.
Yeah,
you stupid baby.
we hire what's his name? Bill Farmer.
Yeah.
And we have him say every word that has ever existed. And we have him voice everything.
I think that makes sense. I think that's pretty smart.
And that's why it's $950. Because we have to pay him.
Yeah. Look at now that I'm the meme of like, here's my budget. My family is
$20, 2 screens, $100 hardware, $10,000. Having Bill Farmer say every word in the English language.
Help me, please. My family is starving. What do you think do you think the next generation will cost more? What more can they even do with consoles?
Than the
now?
Pro? No, I don't think it'll cost more than the Pro.
Okay.
Personally.
Do you think the PS5 Pro will be the most expensive the game consoles ever will be?
I don't know. To be honest, I have trouble visualizing the future of game consoles, like in the PlayStation, Xbox style, past like one more generation.
Right.
You know?
I mean, it just won't do any. It won't be different. Right?
Yeah. Like they would just need to come up. They need to come up with a gimmick, right?
Well, the next gimmick is a it works with a VR headset, right?
That's fair. Yeah. VR, we didn't even talk about VR. VR are also pretty prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
Which does very much impact its ability to enter the market.
Look, that at least feels warranted. I'm like, absolutely, I'm buying some science fiction crap here. Like, I wouldn't want it. If VR headset costs like $200, I'd be like, I don't know about that. That doesn't seem right.
I think the PSVR is actually like the cheapest option. So
ironic.
Yeah.
How do you think it would go? Here's my loss leader strategy for a console. What if I was like, my console is $50?
I don't know.
Like,
I think you'd go bankrupt.
Okay, hear me out here. What if Microsoft came out and they're like, we're releasing the Xbox Pro? What would that even be? The Xbox Series XXX?
Yeah, that's definitely what they should call it.
Yeah.
There's no problems with that.
Whatever, man. Make the dumb names. The Xbox Series A. The Xbox Series A+.
Sure.
Okay? And they're like, and it's $75. But it's only a Game Pass machine.
Is that not what the S is already?
I guess that's true. But like the idea of, what if I made it such a loss leader that like everybody had to freaking get it and then they all had to get Game Pass?
I feel like there's something illegal happening here. But I don't know enough about the law to be able to like put my finger on it. You know?
What's illegal about a bad business decision?
I just something feels illegal, you know? Just got the illegal vibes.
If I'm like colluding with someone about this, right?
Sure.
Price fixing, but I'm not. I have independently made a stupid decision here. No one can stop me.
I don't know.
What if I'm just doing like all sorts of fun console what ifs? What if the Switch 2 is $100, but the games are also $100?
Sounds like a Nintendo move to me.
Just saying.
That sounds like a weird Nintendo freak. We looked at our Magic 8 wall and it told us what to do decision.
That does feel like something Nintendo could do. Right?
Yeah.
Be like, the console's $100, but like Zelda, also $100.
Yeah.
And that'd be a great way for them to kill Sony and Microsoft, because Sony and Microsoft would be like, great, our games are also $100 now, and everyone would be like, no. This also maybe feels illegal.
Yeah. I don't think they could make it so like... Well, maybe they could. I don't know. Could they make... I don't think they can make it so like all third-party games have to be like $100 on their system. So it would just have to be theirs, which they could maybe get away with. If they had been like, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is $120, I think it probably still would have sold pretty well.
Do you think that would it have made up the difference though? Right? Was it 70? It was 60, right?
Tears might have been 70.
They definitely could have bumped it to 80. I don't know. Gamers are so whiny about prices that it's hard. We can't do the like Walmart thing.
But Nintendo can just do whatever. Nintendo can just do whatever it wants.
Now.
Nintendo could be like... well, no, they can't do whatever it wants, right? Of course, the Wii U did not do very well. I was gonna be like, they could be like, you must control the game with this Rubik's Cube, but I think that maybe that wouldn't work.
Remember when Unity was like, we're gonna charge you for every time somebody turns on the game?
Yes, they just walked that back, although pricing is going up in general.
Sure. What if Nintendo sold you a Switch and it was 1 cent, but every time you used it, they charged you...
Again...
50 cents.
Something. Well, I guess that's just an arcade machine, huh? I was gonna say something feels illegal, but a gotcha happens. Is this not just a gotcha?
Is it? I don't know that it's a gotcha.
Pay 50 cents to see if you have a nice experience.
Yeah, fair enough. Did I enjoy myself?
All right. Any last thoughts on consoles and costs and the fact
everything is too expensive now, and it's crazy that we aren't used to it.
That we aren't used to it?
Yeah, it just feels like everything's expensive here in Joe Biden's America, right?
Sure.
And so, like, the fact that there is still backlash to a $700 console is both incredibly unsurprising, because we just seem resistant to anything in games costing more than it cost in 2007. And also seems to me to be like, don't we all already know this, right?
I mean, there's a more immediate sticker shock to, like, looking at a $700 console than, like, the price of my bread has gone up $2 over several years or something like that, you know?
Sure.
And it's not like, well, I'm just speaking for myself, you know? Like, this is my big purchase, right? When am I going to buy a house? When am I going to buy a car? I don't know. I don't know what those things cost. So,
Yeah.
But I know how much consoles cost. So
They don't cost $700.
And they don't cost $700.
You could buy a house and it costs $700, but every time you left, it cost you 50 cents.
Don't put ideas in people's heads. New landlord system.
Yeah. You have to put in quarters.
Slot in quarters to your door to unlock it.
Doesn't sound so expensive when you think about what an iPhone costs.
Will you buy the PS5 Pro? Will Madelyn ever upgrade her phone? Weigh in.
I certainly will not buy the PS5 Pro. I have an Amazon Fire TV. Like, it's just not, like, I have an Amazon Fire TV that I waited until Black Friday to buy.
Right.
You know? Like, it's just not, a Pro system is not in the cards for me.
Right.
Because I'm not a pro.
True.
I am an amateur at best. Well, listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Have you got your pre-order in for the talkie? Patent pending. Are you getting a PS5 Pro? What do you think consoles should cost? Is anything that we proposed this episode illegal? Do you think that I'm right that it's called the Switch 2 because it's going to have 2 screens? Or it's going to, like, fold over or something like that? Or it's only going to be playable by 2 people at the same time? If you have thoughts on this or anything else that we talked about this week, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. But most importantly, if you enjoyed the show, you gotta subscribe. It's 50 cents a play. No, just kidding. It's free. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts. Anywhere that you can find podcasts, you can almost certainly find Talk This, and there you can like it, and you can subscribe, and you can write nice things. And you can also write, they proposed crime.
Yeah. Next week, we're talking about Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, and Pacific Drive.
Can't believe you put Legends of Heroes in there.
We had to get to it eventually. They just announced the remake that is possibly gonna have an English dub or not.
Possible. Well, on that note, listeners, that's our show. Emma, do you have some economic advice to send people off on?
This week, I hope that you find some money under your couch cushions.